right, everybody, welcome back to the Mental Breakdown. I'm your host, Joey Velez. So today, what we're going to be doing is reviewing a clip that I found on social media. And we're going to talk about what it means, like what's the underlying message, but then also how to like implement what that message is into your mental game. So today, I will be joined by a very good friend of mine, Dr. Tony Tucci, Director of Mental Skills for Impact Sports Lab and My 360 Mindset, located just outside of Boston. I'm not going to say the actual name you're in because I know I'm going to mess it up. But Tony, what's up, man? Thank you for
Good to
hopping
see
on.
you, man. Good to see you. Just been a bit. I'm really excited to be on. Love the show. I love the opportunity. Really excited to get going.
Heck yeah, appreciate it. I see you. We got the clothing memo of black hat, black top,
That's how we do.
white-ish background.
Oh yeah,
Look at us, man. We just know what we're doing.
in sync.
Hell yeah. Ah, good band.
Wait,
How's life up there
good
in
man. The
Mass?
business is just booming. All right,
Yeah.
we are expanding to first responders, corporations, college sports, athletes, doing a lot of great clinical work, working in the schools, doing a lot of social emotional learning, helping kids that are kind of falling through the cracks get the support they deserve. Life is good, man. How about you?
Yeah, I was actually looking through your website again too, and I saw like the new additions you had to
Yeah.
it, So I love to hear that. No, life's good, man. Just down here in Wichita Falls, loving my job with the Air Force. It's vastly different from working with military. So going from like infantry personnel to like pilots is
Hmm.
it's been a wild transition, but I love it, man. It's a good spot. And being in Texas, I get to expand a little more, go California, Georgia, Texas, just seeing what the greater US is all about.
Making
Uh,
JFKU proud, man. Look at us.
come on, man. I wrote down Dr. Pope Rhodius to get her on here too, because I think
Oh,
that would just
awesome.
be a good throwback. Since you brought up everything you're doing up there in Boston, why don't you tell the people like what it is that you exactly do?
Yeah, so clinical sports psychologist, we are doing as much work as possible to help people achieve their peak performances and overall sustained wellness in health. We believe that the two go together. When people are performing at their best, that's life and that's wellness and that's sustained health. And so basically, we are trying to take our model into every facet of performance and every facet of mental health to try to show people how to unlock their peak performance and just sustain those habits that will get them hitting their long-term goals all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's a big myth within our field, probably more so with you being on the clinical side too, is that like what we do is strictly about just getting you to perform better, like on the field,
Yeah.
which, yeah, 100%, like that's part of it, but it's all about just like overall holistic health, like helping you as a person as well.
Yeah, no, and I love that. I mean, a lot of the work that we're seeing done in like our corporations with the IO psychology is
Mhm.
that you can do both. You
Yeah.
can have employee wellness and peak performance so that everything is firing on all cylinders. It's not one or the other. And I think that a lot of people are starting to learn that, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. No, it's a good time to be in our field for
Yeah,
sure.
it is.
Just to let all the listeners know, man, like I remember in grad school, I don't know when it was, but I remember you coming up to me and being like, "Hey, man, be ready to move the mass in 10 years."
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
whatever, man. Like, sure, like I'm just down. And then what happens like 7 years later is like get that phone call, like, "Hey, man, you ready to move to Mass?" I was like, "Oh man, this guy actually, good for him, man. Really did it, even a little earlier. I know it was a little later than you wanted to, but like,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember just saying like, "Hey, man, in 10 years, be ready to move." It's like, okay, and here we are. You're
So this
doing
is
it.
networking, right? I mean, we formed those connections in school. We had
Yep.
that alignment and the vision and everything. We got excited. We were driven. We knew how we could change the field. And it's pretty cool to see that we're doing it right now.
Yeah, hell yeah. So that's obviously how we met. Was in grad school. Maintain that connection, but then also like through sports as well.
Yeah.
So speaking of sports, Celtics are looking pretty good right now.
I know, man. If I run into your Warriors, though, I'm gonna be nervous
Ah!
again. I don't know what it is about that kryptonite. All right.
Man, I don't know, man. It's been a struggle for Warriors this year, man. But I mean, that's what happens when you have sustained greatness for so long. It's bound to come down to a certain point.
How I know you're a good friend, man, is that you're not dancing on the Patriots' grave right now. Thank you.
I do have on my notes like RIP Bill Belichick, man. You know?
Oh man, it's the end of a dynasty, end of an era. You know how I was out there defending to the death with them.
Oh
It's
yeah,
different times, man.
yeah. What was it like growing up? Because like I guess I have a similar feel for it with the Warriors, but like I think what the Patriots did. was way two, three times better than what the Warriors did. Different scenarios, obviously, but like, what was it like growing up in that area, like being a Pats fan, running through that greatness?
No, I appreciate you asking that, man, because like I always have to tell people as a Patriots fan, one, I'm not like typical Patriots fans. I get that. But the thing that might have actually set me up for sports psychology was Green Bay Packers, Patriots Super Bowl 95. I was in first grade. I remember that we did a whole pep rally and everything in the school. We targeted all the teachers that were Packers fans and booed them and all that great stuff. And then I see Brett Favre running around the field with his helmet off after they
Mm.
win. Desmond Howard, I think it was just that return, man, that
Oh
crushing
yeah,
return.
yeah,
It actually got me really into the Patriots. So a lot of people are always saying, like, man, you grew up in the perfect time. And I was like, my first memory is Brett Favre smoking us in the Super Bowl.
yeah.
And it was crushing. Are you kidding me? In first grade. And then I actually remember coming home from a birthday party once, and it was the Tuck game, and it was a
Oh
snowball
yeah.
versus the Raiders. So sorry to bring that up, man.
RP,
But
dude. I mean,
yeah,
just
and seeing that call overturn and it all started there. I got to
yeah,
see the first Super Bowl with my dad. It was really fun,
yeah.
really great memory, and we just watched them win. And you could almost, I can remember it like his relief of being able to see that for the first time, paired
Oh
with
yeah,
me like kind of repairing like a 95 memory that wasn't even that big of a deal. It was a really cool memory. And then, man, just got so fascinated with how a dynasty works.
yep,
I think the main part about the Patriots dynasty that really spoke to me was the art of war mentality that they had, that Sun
yeah,
Tzu art of war. And so really dove into that. A lot of the philosophy that applies to the sports psychology I took. How do you maintain greatness in the long term?
yeah.
And you can only hold on for so long, right?
Yeah, because like it's easy to do it. I say easy. It's easy to do it 1 year, but when you're doing it year in, year out, like maintaining that same mentality, maintaining that same level of standard, like it's not easy to do. You know, and same thing with the Warriors. Like my first memories of the Warriors were just them getting the crap kicked out of them. You know, but the games were fun. You know, like I remember every game I went to, they would lose by 30, but man, did I have a good time at those games. You know, so like I hearing what you talking about, like that just made me realize like you can appreciate and still have fun when things aren't going your way. That's not what got me into the field, but like,
Yeah.
I mean, just understanding like the different aspects of like, or at least what you can learn from sport, you know?
Yeah. And
Um,
just to let everyone know, all right, I'm not the fair weather fan. I still buy tickets. I still go to the games all the time. Still, I suffer in that misery of plenty of games where I see Damian Harris fumbling to win the game versus the Dolphins in the opener, Mac Jones, and all this great stuff.
yeah,
I'm there.
yeah.
Don't worry, I'm still there.
Hey, like Buddha said, man, with life comes death, you know,
Ooh,
with
I like
being
that.
a fan, you know, with the good times, you gotta be willing to sit in the bad times, you know?
I had plenty of good times. I can suffer a little bit. I know it's coming.
Yeah, exactly. You know, yeah, I got to witness the championship. I'm good to go now. Yeah. What is so? This is something I do with all the people I talk to and interview and everything like that. But like, what's something you? I mean, you obviously know the research behind gratitude, but like, what's something you're grateful for in your life right now?
Ooh, the opportunity I got matching, like finding Impact Sports Lab. We had talked forever about like in grad school about what vision we had for sports psychology, how to get athletes hitting their potential, and to be able to come to Mass, get licensed, and find that gym that was already set up. Kind of makes you realize that, yeah, your goals are really ambitious, but it's nice when there's already something in place that you can jump onto rather than start from scratch. So I'm really grateful that I found Impact. Ian Carrera, amazing owner. We're a great team. Just my family, man, is so awesome. I know so much has changed. You know, wife and kid just doing
Yeah,
great out here, loving life out here. Good to be back in New England, just where I'm from, man, where I need to be. So just looking back from or looking into JFKU and seeing where I was hoping I would be, I'm really grateful that I'm at where I wanted to be.
yeah, man. And shout out to you. You know, again, like I think putting that vision out there, you know, and making sure you follow through on it. I think a lot of people maybe they see that it becomes too big or too overwhelming, and they kind of give up on it. Or it's like, yeah, here's what I want to do, but it's not too attainable or too attainable. But like you stuck with it, man, and like now you're out there doing it, and you're in your hometown doing it, man.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
can't beat
I'm in
that.
my like house that I grew up in, man. I bought my house.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
it's
that's sick.
yeah, man. So
Uh,
it's good to be home and it's good to be doing what I really love to be doing. I'm very lucky that my job, while I work a ton, 8 to 8 Monday through Saturday, I am loving what I do. I'm very privileged.
I mean, sure, it doesn't feel like work though.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
Maybe sometimes end of the week you're like, God, dude, I'm just
I appreciate
tired.
that, man, but like this is how I know I'm lucky. You ever have like that great workout and you're like, damn, I'm tired, but that was good. Like that's kind of how I get to feel, Saturday night.
Yeah. No, my last job, we used to run 2-week resilience courses.
Nice.
Uh, and everybody would always say, like, man, they're so tiring. They're so tiring. Like, end of day, end of 2 weeks. And like, my first couple, I never got tired. And I was like, am I doing something wrong? Or is it just that, like, I just enjoy it so I don't feel like I'm drained? And it was more the latter, right? Like,
Yep.
it is a lot of work, but it's fulfilling as opposed to like being draining, you
Yeah.
know? Same thing now. It's like I'll put in the hours. It's fine. Like if I need to work early, if I need to work late, it's fine because I enjoy it. So it's not gonna. I'm not gonna feel like I'm burning out or anything like that.
Yeah. And just because I'm always loving the topics and loving the teaching, like you actually bring up a good point, man. It's the impact you're having over the work that helps you fight that burnout. So many people confuse burnout with just overworking.
Yeah,
And man, I'm putting in 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, but it's the impact you have over your work
yeah,
that really staves off that burnout. So it's pretty cool new piece of research that we're teaching a lot of the people in like the IO psychology field of, hey, you can work yourself if you enjoy it and you feel like you're making an impact on your life and whatever your goals are, helps you do a lot more than you think you're capable of.
yeah. And I think always attaching yourself to like what your purpose is,
Yeah.
or why you're doing these things. Like
Mhm.
why am I putting in 10, 12-hour days like regularly? Well, it's because this gives me an opportunity to make an impact on anybody.
Yeah.
And that could be what you need to get through the day, you know? I think there's also like that to me that I'm also hearing like this idea of like a work-life balance. People always like misuse that term.
Yep. Yep.
Like, hey, I'm working 40 hours a week. That means I need to have 40 hours of me time. It's like, okay, well, there's not enough time in the week for that, because you gotta sleep, you know? So it's like, what can I
That's
do
my
that helps
biggest
me
thing,
feel
man.
more fulfilled? Like maybe that's an hour week that makes the 40 hours feel worth it? So it's like,
Yeah.
gotta make the
I
adjustments,
fully
man.
agree. It's the sleep is big for me. I'm glad you brought that up. I cannot function without sleep. So to
Yeah.
all the listeners out there, yes, we're talking about impact over your work, helping you fight through burnout, but you got to get your sleep. I am a mess if I don't get my sleep. But
It's
yeah,
I notice a lot of like the people I work with when they're struggling, one of the first questions I ask is, what's your sleep like?
yep, yep.
I'm getting 4 hours a night. It's like, okay, step one, let's change that. Like,
I love that because we just had New Year's and the New Year's resolution paradox where everyone comes into our gym on January, tries to overload their change schedule,
yep,
and they crash. And
yep,
so one of our main methods of habit change is start low and go slow. So a lot of times people will come into our gym and we say, "What's your sleep like?" All right, you're not getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. We're not going to do anything until you can start that weekly.
yeah,
Because why are you going to be doing a bunch of workouts if you're not going to recover?
yep,
Why are you going to be trying all these new habit changing strategies if your brain won't log them that night and make them actually into habits? So
yep.
yeah, I love that you bring up the sleep. That's a big thing that we focus on a ton at our gym is sleep first because none of this work will matter. None of it will register if you're not getting good sleep.
Yeah, and I think that's where, I mean, I could do a show on this with
Yeah.
those motivational clips on Instagram about like, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or
Yeah.
sleep is for people who are broke. It's like, I get it, what you're trying to say, but nah, man, like you got to sleep. Maybe your schedule doesn't allow you to get 7 to 9 hours like every night, because working with military, like sometimes they don't have that, so you got to
Yeah.
focus on quality as opposed to quantity. But
Yeah.
if you can get, if your schedule allows you to get 7 to 9 hours, like prioritize that. Like with
Yeah.
high level performance, one of the first things to go is recovery.
Yes.
If I want to be the best that I can be, I cannot waste any time sleeping, taking days off. No, I got to do it. It's like, well, I get the mindset, but I think in the long run, what's going to help you is making sure you recover more effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, look at all of the elite performers that are actually elite performers. This is what gets really concerning as a sports psychologist, seeing the social media trends of people that are they actually hitting their elite potential?
Yeah.
Because they're just talking like they are. But if you look at anyone that is celebrated for their elite performance, they always are talking about prioritizing sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he's kind of a controversial figure as far as like goats go in the UFC, but like Habib, all right, Habib would literally be sleeping 2 hours before his fight.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that someone that's putting in the amount of work that he's putting in and then prioritizing naps in between his workouts and he's getting 4 workouts in a day, that he's doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So
I
I
mean,
just think that I would encourage all the listeners that are following individuals that are preaching sleep as a privilege and a luxury to really question their resume and to
yeah,
really see if they're learning from the greats.
yeah.
Because Kobe talks about this too. Talks about starting early, napping, going back, napping, getting 4 workouts in and 4 naps in if you can.
Well, I don't remember what I was reading or listening to, but Kobe early on in his career, he said sleep sucks. Like, no, I'm sacrificing sleep. And then
Yes.
he realized, like, why
Yep.
am I so sluggish all the time? Oh, it's because I don't
Yes.
sleep. So he started to prioritize sleep, and he said he felt a lot better. Like he was still getting 4 or 5 workouts in a day, but waking up at 4 a.m. But like you said, he would take naps. Like he
Yep.
would prioritize sleep, like because he understood. So it's like, yeah, I think just get the misconception like I don't need to sleep. It's like no, let's start to like change that narrative. Like let's
Yeah.
talk about how sleep actually can help you perform better.
Yeah. And I think it's going to go into the topic that we might like broach today, but the idea for a lot of people that are choosing to not sleep or sacrificing sleep, if it's not things like dopamine regulation problems, other types of things that are getting in the way of like pulling away from the screen and going to bed, like I get all those. But if you're choosing to prioritize certain things over your sleep, I really encourage you to go to objective results and see if you're hitting your marks because
Yeah,
I bet you you're not.
yeah, it's all about choice, right? Do I stay up an extra hour and play Call of Duty, or do I get an extra hour of sleep?
Yeah. And
You know,
actually, one thing that I love to talk about is this like environmental control.
yep,
How people just don't use alarms and they're so helpful. You want to go play some Call of Duty, set an alarm for 45 minutes, an hour.
yeah,
And when that goes off, you're making a conscious choice to continue versus being sucked in to that dopamine mode where it's really hard to pull out.
yeah, yeah. I've been in those modes where it's like hop on to play a couple games, and then 3 hours later, I'm like, oh, I'm still here.
We see this with ADHD all the time. I'm just going to sit down for a minute. No, you're not.
Yeah, no, it's not gonna happen.
Yep.
Well, speaking of, so you kind of brought up like this might come up on the topic or later, but so let's get into the video.
Yeah.
Um, so if you're just listening on the podcast, you're not going to see the video. You're going to hear the audio, but the video will be up on YouTube for those of you that want to watch it. But the clip is from, God, it must have been mid '90s because MJ's in his Bulls gear. So it's Michael Jordan doing some sort of workshop with parents, and he's talking about, how to help their kids playing basketball, but specifically how to handle the ups and downs of basketball, makes and misses. So as we go through this, what I want you just to kind of pay attention to is like, yeah, what is he saying? And then we're going to kind of dissect the message that he's given. So let me go ahead and fire this bad boy up real quick.
People put too much seriousness to, success and failure, especially on the basketball court. If you take a shot, you can only do two things: make it or miss. That's how simple it is. That's what you try to get to your kids, so they're not afraid of that simple act. When I took that shot, whatever shot it was, in my mind, first of all, I'm thinking I'm gonna make it. Secondly, if I don't, okay, we can come back tomorrow, work hard, make sure that when I get in that situation, I'm gonna make the shot. But you don't put the end of the world on that one particular event. And kids sometimes have a tendency to do that. So you as a parent, you have to simplify it as much as possible to show them that either way, I still love you if you miss that shot. I still think you're still a great basketball player if you miss that shot.
Okay.
Love it.
Yeah, but Michael Jordan, letting the parents know what to do. So I'm gonna get your thoughts, but I think yeah, there were definitely a couple of things he said that I think are important to discuss, right? So I think the first thing I heard is that people put too much into their successes and failures. And I think what comes to mind when I hear that is when you hear high level performers talk about how like failure is not an option and what that message kind of gives. It's not that failure is not an option. Like they know failure is an option. If you go into a game, if you go into taking a jump shot, there's two outcomes. You're going to make it, which is a success, or you're going to miss, and that's a failure. It's not like, oh no, I'm going to make it every time. If it was that way, I'd be in the NBA right now, 20-year career, like ready to retire, and that's what I'm doing. But that's not the case, right? So I think having that idea, the mentality of, failure isn't an option, all that does is just adds pressure to when things go wrong. Like it almost gives you like fake confidence that like, oh no, I don't have to worry about failure. Well, what happens when you do? So I think that was my first initial takeaway uh, from this clip.
I think this is one of the best clips you could have shown, man, because man, does this bring in so many topics that I'm talking to athletes, coaches, parents, bosses, like leaders, teachers, everyone that needs to understand the confidence formula. So what we use at Impact is a confidence formula. Confidence, that trust in yourself that you can handle the failure or succeed. Confidence equals belief times results. And this is why I think a lot of people enjoy our model and realize that we're not doing cliche psychology that unfortunately it gets kind of misbranded in society of the we ought to be all like in touch with feelings and emotions and all this stuff, which is great, but we work on emotion regulation different. In this instance, when you balance belief and results, we go to what's called attachment theory in
Hmm.
psychology. So what attachment means is that you have a security in yourself that you know you're safe in the pack, your pack has your back, and that you can keep pushing yourself further and further to try to test your limits and grow. Now, I pull in this attachment formula that goes with confidence to kind of explain why this clip is so amazing. So a secure attachment with yourself equals unconditional times conditional. When he talked about how a parent needs to go into the kid and say, I love you no matter what you do.
Yep.
That's what we call unconditional support. Your family has your back no matter what happens. That is such a safety net that propels us to hit our potential. I
Yep.
use the analogy of a trapeze artist. Those trapeze swings on the circus that if the listeners know, I'd ask you all, would you ever try that your first time without a safety net?
Oh, no
Probably
shot.
not.
Yeah, no shot.
Because how are you going to practice? You're going to
Yeah.
be holding on for dear life because you know one slip up, you fall and you die.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to be able to learn the trick, like the tricks, the flips, the moves. You're
Yeah.
just going to be holding on for dear life. And unfortunately, too many people play the game like this
Yeah.
because they don't have that safety net. They don't have that unconditional, I can fail and still figure this out. But where a lot of people get concerned with the sports psychology, and I show them that we're still results driven, is the conditional side. Because if you only have one piece of the equation, you're not going to get the full secure attachment or the full confidence. That's why I use multiplication
Yeah.
as the formula. So then you have conditional worth where you have a caregiver or a coach or even a person that knows what they're capable of. And that if they fail, they got someone to catch them. Now they're going to be a little more confident to push themselves conditionally and
Yeah.
start testing their limits. And so what MJ was preaching right there is an amazing balance between belief in yourself times the results. When you only focus on unconditional belief, you kind of get that coddled athlete. They don't really ever
Yeah.
get pushed. But then you have the perfectionist that doesn't ever have that unconditional support and they have all conditional driven attachments. And so they might have a great performance, but it's never enough because you multiply 10 out of 10 condition worth or
Yeah.
results to a 0 out of 10 belief or unconditional, and it brings the whole equation down.
Yeah. And I think hearing that too, like when you have coaches, parents, whoever, you do good and it's like, hey, I'm proud of you. Well, it's like that result is like, oh, I need to do this again for that person to be
Yeah.
proud of me, to get their recognition. And I think that kind of ties into what you're talking about is like, yeah, how we as coaches, parents, other individuals, how are we even acknowledging the performance of other people,
Love it.
you know?
Love
So
it.
it's like, yeah, I think having that security blanket up front of being like, hey, no matter what you do, like I still love you, like what that can do for a person. Or I
Yeah.
think I don't know where I heard it. I was listening to some podcast, but instead of saying like I am proud of you, like saying like I'm happy for you, and
Mm,
what that does to kind of change that response, right? So
yeah.
now it's not so much that like it's tied to that result, like, oh, I need to achieve this result, they're going to be proud of me. It's like, hey, they're kind of like now they're just like building my momentum and they're happy for what I did or happy for me because now I'm feeling good, sort of thing, and what that can do in terms of like performance.
Dude, I love what you're talking about because this is the idea of you personalizing your performances and knowing what you're capable of. So often I'm working with athletes to identify with what their strengths are. I hate the mindset of always know your weaknesses and always work on your weaknesses because I go with the approach of a rising tide raises all boats. If you are driven by your strengths, which is the tide, I promise you your weaknesses will catch up.
Yeah,
Of course, you don't ignore them, you don't mask them,
yeah,
but you don't obsess over them.
yeah,
And this is what conditional driven performance tends to do with people is that you take your mind off of everything that's working so well and you just focus on all the things you need to fix
Yeah.
When if you just stayed focused on what's working well, those things will catch up.
Yeah. And like the tide, right? It comes down, it goes back up.
Yeah.
So I think having this like balance of doing both, and he even talks about it with the self-talk, like, hey, if I make it, I'm gonna go into the shot saying I'm going to make it, right? So having that confidence. But if it doesn't work, then I'm going to work hard to make sure when I'm in that situation again, I'll make it, right? So like it's not ignoring the failure, it's not only praising his success. He's like, hey, if I made it, hell yeah, like let's keep doing that. If I miss, okay, what do I need to do to fix it
Yeah.
to go into it? Because at least he can take away like, hey, I went into it confidently.
Yeah.
And if you
This
can
is
go into
a
any situation
great
confidently, it's like that's always something you can take with to the next performance.
Yeah, Gilbert Arenas has a great clip about this where he missed those free throws for the Cavs, and he's ecstatic in the interview because he's handling it like a professional. He knows he gets to go into the lab tomorrow and make 2,000 free throws, and
Yeah.
he's excited. Now, in this clip, I actually show it to show the dangers of what we call projection. So I'll get
Yeah.
to that in a bit, but it's
Yeah.
a really great clip of how you handle horrible failure in the biggest moments. Those were huge free throws he missed, and he still is excited to get back into the lab. This is the mentality we're trying to push, is that mistakes are opportunistic, not threats.
Yeah.
And so often, if you talk to an athlete, why I kind of like society nowadays with the mental health and the destigmatization of it, it's good that I don't think people are afraid of mistakes anymore.
Yeah.
I think they kind of get they're not afraid of mistakes. Where we're not pushing our athletes enough to understand and dissect their fear, though, is the consequences of the mistake.
Yeah.
Anyone can tell you, I don't care if I miss a shot. But what about if your teammates are mad, if you're getting booed, if you're worried about the next shot now, if you worry
Yeah.
about your spot in the team? So I encourage all the listeners that have ever had to go through this fear of failure and kind of avoid trying to push themselves to play it safe, unpack your fear.
Yeah.
Is it just the missed shot you're worried about, or is it all the consequences of that missed shot that your mind is flooding you with and it's hard to grasp and understand until you unpack it?
Yeah.
So always unpack your fear.
Yeah, and I think that's even something that I wrote down as not to jump ahead. As something that I wrote down is like, what would be an intervention that I would teach
Hmm.
this athlete? And I think that's part of it is like, how do you handle your misses and like, why do you do that? Or
Yeah.
like, what is it? Why is it so draining to you that like you just missed a shot and now it's like the end of the world?
Yeah.
It's like being able to uncover that, might show you that, oh, this is actually not even a real thing. I'm actually just catastrophizing this moment.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think it's like you said, it's not about like avoiding the failure, avoiding the consequence. Yeah, I think at this point people understand like mistakes are opportunities. Like I'm okay with failing. It's okay, but like how do we it's okay to feel that way, but how do you still learn from that situation?
Yeah.
Because I think those are two different things.
I love when I see an athlete get excited to make a mistake. Like
Yeah.
look, show me what I did wrong. Like I'll play darts in our sessions sometimes to teach imagery and things like that. And the way I do this is a little sneaky because our dartboard is set up where the whole gym can see our session.
Oh heck yeah.
Everyone, if they choose to look in that window, they can see us playing darts. And so I tell the athletes, hey, everyone's watching you. All right, let's see how you do.
Build
They
that
hit the
pressure.
wall, they hit the wall, all that stuff. They're getting nervous and they're just afraid, not of missing the dart. They didn't care. That's why they wanted to try to throw darts. They
Yeah.
care about the social evaluative threat,
Yeah.
which is a deeply ingrained part of our biology. So that's something we can definitely dive into, but I could go for days talking about that.
Well, I mean, it's definitely something, right? Like people, I think there's something to like a level of acceptance of like what the situation is,
Yep.
right? It's like
Yep.
there's people around me, there's people going to be watching. I understand that, but I think using that in a way to like prepare you for that moment, or even a way to like reflect. Like, I was out there shooting free throws, and I was getting booed, and I ended up missing because I was focusing my attention on the noise as opposed to like what my form was, right? So it's like I love that you're able to put people in those pressure situations.
Yeah, it's fun, man. That's why I love this work. Like I still do clinical psychology. I do all that
Yeah.
work as well. But when you're in the moment in vivo training, that's how you build these habits. And without getting too far off, I think it'd be helpful maybe to the listeners to explain how I kind of conceptualize this idea of perfectionism,
Yeah.
because that's what's happening here with the fear of failure. So going back to that confidence formula, if you don't have a solidified belief that you know how good you are and what you're capable of, you're going to be chasing that and you're going to be very results driven. But no matter how many results you pile up, you're multiplying it by a zero belief and it's always going to be crashing down.
Yeah.
And to bring in the clinical perspective, I'm not telling any of the listeners here if you have perfectionistic traits, you don't have OCD, things like that. But a lot of the work that we see is an obsessive compulsive cycle
Yep.
with perfectionism. So to those that aren't aware of it, the way OCD works is what's called a false safety behavior cycle. There is a false threat, one that is either not going to happen at all, or if it happened, you'd be able to survive it, like stuttering in a presentation and being laughed at. You can
Yeah.
survive that.
Yeah.
So what happens is the threat is perceived. Unfortunately, our brains are so fast and so
Yeah.
far ahead of us. If anyone's ever flinched before, this is what I'm talking about. You didn't have to tell your body to flinch, it was ready.
Yeah.
So threat processing happens so quickly and outside of our awareness a lot of the time. So if you have an obsessive fear of failure because you don't feel like you're enough, or you feel like your whole self-worth and image depends on your results instead of that solidified belief, now you have a false threat. As human beings, fortunately, we're not in the woods anymore running from bears, but our bears now,
Thankfully.
yeah, but our bears now are social evaluative threat.
Yeah.
Where is our status in the pack? And so, unfortunately, there's a part of the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, and even the amygdala complex, our fear centers, that gets triggered when we feel like we've upset the pack, when we might get kicked out. Because now that actually leads to going in the woods and fighting those bears again.
Yep.
So what people struggle to understand is that the fear response is still firing as if we're in front of those bears. Social evaluative threat is a real trigger. And
Yeah.
so when you have that threat, you have now an obsessive perfectionistic mindset. I can only get through that threat, survive it, by hitting results, by meeting conditions that show I'm worthy in the pack.
Yeah.
And so you do what's called a false safety behavior of overworking. I have had athletes work out before a game. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Because it made them feel more in control. And so the problem with the obsessive compulsive cycle, the safety behavior cycle, is I have this threat that I'm not enough. My answer to getting rid of that is keep performing at my best. So I obsessively and compulsively overwork myself, ironically taking away my ability to perform at my best.
Yeah.
So while I feel short-term relief that at least I'm putting in the work, I have some sense of control. The long-term loss is the problem, because with perfectionism, I hate to say it, you all, you'll never feel like you did it. You'll never get validated by your environment.
Yeah.
Like the undefeated teams still have plenty of film that their coach pulls up to say you could have played better, you could have done this more, better
Yeah.
stats. Every parent I've ever worked with, there's plenty of times where they're hitting their marks and being perfect parents, but they're never going to feel like that.
Yeah.
And so when we get to it, I do want to get into the topic of growth perfection versus fixed perfection. But just what we're talking about now, the avoidance of failure is a safety mechanism that might make you feel a little bit better now, but you are causing a perfectionistic phobia of fear of losing your social status.
Yeah, and I think what comes to mind is you have a test and like you're cramming right before a test,
Mm-hmm.
right? Same kind of thing. It's like I don't feel like I'm going to pass this test, so let me just like study and just cram more. Even though academic research shows that that isn't best practices for helping anything. If
And now
anything, it
you have
helps you retain
sorry.
like the last thing you read. But
Yeah. Self-fulfilling prophecy, man. So now
yeah,
all of a sudden you're afraid of failing the test. You decide to stop that fear by studying your butt off, but now you don't sleep because you're
yep,
studying all night, and now you forget all the information the next day, and
yep,
you have caused the bad thing to happen by trying to prevent it. And this
yep.
is what's really hard for athletes to see, that your strategies of staying in control and preventing all this stuff is actually causing all the bad stuff to happen.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where I think, like, perfectionism gets a bad rap. I think it's just how you interpret that perfectionism.
Mm.
Are you trying to be perfect, or are you striving for perfection? I think, like, there's a big difference in that. I think it's okay to strive to be the best you can be, but if you don't reach that perfection, how are you now handling that? If it's like, "Hey,
Love it.
I did my best to get there, but now let's keep working. And you're able to acknowledge that like you did good. That's where I think that's okay. But like you said, if I'm trying to be perfect, I'm never going to achieve perfection. Even the greats, they'll go, basketball, they'll go 10 for 10 from the field. They're gonna find something,
Yeah. I've
you
had
know?
keepers post clean sheets and tell me that they shanked a punt out of bounds and that's all that's in their head. I'm like, why does that
Yeah,
matter?
exactly.
So,
But I think that like what you're talking about too also ties into something he said at like the end, is not putting the end of the world based off of like
yep,
one simple event.
yep,
Based off of a missed shot does not mean the world is going to end. I think that also ties into Seligman's work behind like explanatory style and things like that. You know, so it's like uh I think that directly goes in line with what you were about to talk about with, you said it was fixed and
Growth, perfection. Yeah.
yeah. So
That was
so say a
actually my
little bit more about
dissertation,
that.
by the way, Seligman. Let's go.
Love that guy, man.
Yeah, he responded to me. I actually emailed him to ask if he approved of my dissertation topic. He's at Penn
Oh,
State,
really?
and he gave me the thumbs up. It was really cool. So
Hell
shout out
yeah.
to Seligman.
Hell yeah, dude.
Yeah,
We got to get him on the podcast now,
that'd be awesome. Yeah.
I don't know what I'd do with myself, but that'd be sick. Uh,
Starstruck.
yeah, exactly, right. You just talk for the next 2 hours, please. Yeah, so say more about
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah. So um, we want to keep in mind that idea of balancing beliefs and results. If I have a definition for perfect, listeners, there is real perfection, I promise. Okay. Like I told you I'm a performance psychologist. I believe in that stuff. There's a real perfection. It's just not the fixed perfection where you
Yeah.
cross the finish line and feel like I was perfect. What perfection is, everyone, is matching your confidence to your competence. When you align your actual skill with your knowledge of how skilled you are, these are the individuals that always hit their potential. So in learning theory, there's the idea of the stretch zone.
Hmm.
Too many perfectionists put themselves in what's called the panic zone. They're not set up for the challenge, they overcompensate, and they're going to set themselves up for a failure performance. Sometimes we also stay in the comfort zone. We play it safe because we can't fail, but we got to try to push ourselves to the stretch zone,
Hmm.
a little bit of discomfort where we're growing. And so perfectionism is that idea of I know how good I am, I know what I'm capable of, and it's okay that I'm not exactly where I need to be yet, because those individuals will always put themselves in the stretch zone.
Hmm.
They don't overcompensate, they don't play it safe. And this is why it's not just a mentality of perfect, it's not just me being nice, it is actual performance driven perfectionism. So if it's okay with you, I actually want to show the Dunning-Kruger graph.
Yeah, hold on, yeah, because I remember you were talking about that. So you're saying how is that so the perfectionism you're talking about, that's where you kind of stay within that stretch zone, but
Yep.
I feel like with what people think perfectionism is maybe they're more in that panic or comfort zone as opposed to that stretch zone.
Nailed it. It is the body's natural reaction to overcompensate and then play it safe.
Okay.
We feel like we need to do everything above our head and then we crash and we need to get back to playing it safe and feel like we're confident again
Okay.
versus that ever growing just perfection like development.
Yeah. Yeah, you should be good to share
Cool.
the screen now, I believe.
All right. So the listeners, please pardon the language used on this graph. The Dunning-Kruger effect, I think it kind of frustrated a lot of the researchers, if you can tell with this part right here.
Yep.
So for those that don't know, the Dunning-Kruger effect is what's called a cognitive bias. A cognitive bias is just how we are seeing the world. It is what is shaping our perception. What glasses did we put on to see the world through? And the Dunning-Kruger bias is a lens that we put on that involves this balance between actual skill and belief in the skill we have. So this is the Dunning-Kruger effect. When you get a little bit of knowledge or skill in something, you kind of feel like you're the expert.
Oh yeah.
Anyone that's ever talked about like, did you have this happens all the time in politics, unless people have studied political science, they love to talk politics and kind of cling on to their one belief that makes them feel extremely competent and confident.
Hmm.
Now, again, I'm not shaming anyone. This is a very common process. Like this is
Yeah.
just what happens in humans. But
You
I
learn
actually
something, you
don't.
want to go tell people about it.
Yeah, exactly. That's a
Yeah.
great way to say it.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, I don't run into many like Dunning-Kruger athletes. I run into the imposter syndrome athletes.
Hmm.
So what we do is we learn a little bit like this actually is a funny thing I went through with psychology. I remember in my first master's program, I learned about cognitive behavioral therapy and the connection between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And I was like, oh, that's it. I know everything there is to know. I just got to change the way I think and I'll change the way I feel and behave. Like that's
Done
so
deal.
simple.
It's
And
super
then,
easy.
yeah. And then you realize like, oh, wow, look at how much there is to know about psychology.
Yeah.
And you feel like a phony. You feel
Yep.
like an imposter. And this is where perfectionism starts because no one up here, the over cocky athlete, is not struggling with perfectionism.
Yeah.
The
They
ones
think they
that feel
got
like
it,
they're not enough. Oh, sorry, what?
They think they got it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so even though you get a little bit more knowledge, experience, and competency, your confidence plummets.
Yeah.
How did I think I knew so how did I think I knew so much? How did I not realize how much I really need to keep growing? But this is a crucial piece of development for an athlete because we can pull you out of this.
Yeah.
If you can tell, like confidence here is not matching confidence. It's a rectangle.
Yeah.
Same thing here, though. When you start to hit the slope of enlightenment, what this looks like is an athlete realizing they're going to be a lifelong learner. And
Yeah.
this is where I talk about growth perfection. When you match your confidence to your competence, you're going to keep growing.
Yep.
You're going to keep putting yourself in positions that show you what you're capable of. You're not going to fear the failure because it's going to make you feel like an imposter all over again. And you're going to be putting yourself in that stretch zone. You're going to be hitting all your marks. And that's the idea of growth perfection. Match your confidence to your competence. And one quick intervention that I like to do with our athletes is the create your player profile.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone that's ever played FIFA or NBA 2K and you create a player, I love those games because they already give you all the stats and attributes that you need. So I'll print out the attributes. I'll have them score themselves based off of their competition level, their age group, not professionals.
Yep.
And then we start to see, hey, you know, your coach actually rated you all like this, and you're rating yourself like this. Are you underselling yourself? Are you overselling yourself? And it really helps people become aware of how they see their skills and what their actual skills are. So when you match competency with confidence, you get perfection.
Yeah, and I think even going back to that graph, just I'm picturing just the shock to the system that people experience once they realize, like, I
It
don't
sucks.
know that much,
It
you
sucks.
know? And something I was always told, like, even at my last job, the mentors there would say, like, hey, at 6 months, you're gonna realize how much you didn't know when you started this job, and then at a year, you're gonna realize how much you didn't know at 6 months. So it's like it's always gonna be this cycle. But yeah, it's like what happens when you experience that initial, like, oh, I actually don't know as much as I thought. Is it I'm not good enough, or is it, oh man, there's so much I have to learn? Like, heck yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you can start to see, like, what type of perfectionism is going to be molded,
Love it.
right?
So the simplest way I say it is we're trying to shift our perception from threat mode to opportunity mode.
Yeah,
And when you see opportunity in mistakes, it's very exciting. It's those athletes that don't care that they messed up and they want to keep going and keep going. It's exciting. Our
yeah,
brains crave this.
yeah. Going time back into that dopamine release, because as soon as you start learning more information, you're like, oh, this is sick. Like,
Yeah.
I'm doing
And
more. I'm learning more. This is great. Like, why do I not want to keep doing this?
not to get all morbid and intense, like this is a little bit of a dramatization here, but the brain doesn't grow when you keep doing things you know. Like
Yeah,
it needs to be pushed. When
yeah,
you like that dartboard, for example, every time someone misses when they're learning, the brain is firing on all cylinders. What the heck just happened? Why did my projectile go that way? What about
yeah,
this way? And it's learning, and then you hit that bullseye, and it just encompasses every piece of data you got into a new skill. Now you're in flow. And
yeah.
so this is why athletes that are playing it safe and holding themselves back and doing these false safety behaviors, they just are never going to hit their potential, and it's tragic.
It playing not to mess up as opposed to, like, playing
Yeah.
to succeed, or playing, to be your best, whatever it is,
Yeah, we have a saying that like our whole kind of step-by-step breakdown is called being the storm, because I've seen that too many athletes are trying to survive the storm instead of actually go out there and be that force. So I
Yeah,
tell athletes all the time, don't just try to survive your storm, like be that storm out there.
yeah,
And I have a whole kind of set list of those skills that athletes will learn and be able to develop that tendency. It's pretty
yeah.
cool.
And I mean, sometimes you need to be in that survive mindset, like, hey, just get
Mhm.
me through this moment. But yeah, I think it's getting athletes to understand, like, you don't have to live here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there are other ways to think and approach this situation. Because I mean, yeah, going back to my last one, we're teaching resilience a lot. So sometimes it is like, hey, sometimes, like, I just got to get through this crappy time. I just got to survive right
Yeah.
now. But like once I make it through, it's like, all right, now let's shift to more of this, like, thriving mentality. Like, what can I do now to, like, climb up that mountain, go up that peak of competence and confidence? You know what I'm saying? So it's
I
like,
love it, man. And if you're interested, I can actually get into some of the be the storm skills that people might be able to practice on their own.
so yeah, you talked about one was how do you kind of help mold that idea of competence and competence, right? So, like, creating your own profile, tying back into the video. Like,
Yeah.
if you were working with, I want to keep it to probably like the athlete, but like I know you work with a lot with parents, so I think we can
Mhm.
benefit from that side too. Like, what is a skill you would teach the child? What's something you would teach the parent to kind of help them? get away from this idea of like tying their self-worth to the outcome?
Love it.
What
So
would
I'm
you
going
do?
to take two different approaches here. With the parents, I go into what's called projection and projective identification. And I use what's called the ARC model, attachment, self-regulation, and competency model in trauma work to actually show some pretty effective parenting skills that if any parent's doing these four basic skills, they're kind of crushing it. All right, so I'll get to that in a minute. But with the athlete, the routine I would love to see every performer, whether athlete or not, every single person do before a performance is the be the storm method. And this is when you are taking over, you are hacking your self-fulfilling prophecy cycle.
Mm,
So for those that don't know, the brain is primed to do negative threat-based self-fulfilling prophecies. It remembers a time where something bad happened. It anticipates that that will happen again, and it dictates your attention to only see those threats throughout your day. Anyone that's gone, and that confirms a prophecy.
yeah,
Anyone that's ever gotten out of bed and said, today is going to stink. And now everything that you are paying attention to confirms that bias.
yep,
That's how the prophecy gets fulfilled. Well, the be the storm approach is trying to show the brain the benefits of a more efficient prediction process and how you can actually create your performances, not manifestation necessarily, because we can measure this. I call it measurable manifestation. All right. Not just closing your eyes and picturing a Lamborghini that shows up,
yeah.
but like, how do we actually
Might not
measure
happen, but you know,
it? Yeah. I mean, it'd be awesome. I would love
yeah,
law
it'd
of
be sick
attraction
if
if
it
it
was that
worked like
easy,
that.
right? Like,
You know what I mean?
I want
But
a
with
million
this,
bucks.
yeah. Student loans gone.
Yeah, hell yeah.
um, so with this, the first step always has to be the highlight reel. You have to intentionally force your brain to pull on a highlight similar to your current challenge where you succeeded in the past.
Mm,
Self-efficacy is the idea that you can accomplish or you can overcome the next challenge. The best way to feel that is you've done it in the past.
yep,
But the brain won't do this automatically. So you have to use your imagery skills to remember, man, I have a presentation coming up. I'm really nervous, but I remember this presentation I did with a huge room and it went really well. And so when you highlight reel, you're forcing your brain to pull on a positive past experience, not the threat-based experience, because this will now dictate what your expectations are. And I
yep,
know I love my math formulas, but just simply put, I actually have a subjective reality formula. Subjective reality, your experiences in the moment equal your past experiences plus your future expectations. And those dictate your current sensory experiences, what you're
yep,
paying attention to, all that stuff. So what you do is you try to show the brain how to forcefully go to positive past experiences. When you highlight reel, you figure out how you did that. My presentation went well because I started out strong with this one sentence. I brought water with me. I maintain eye contact and I maintain energy management. So this is a really important term called neutral self-talk that we use at My 360 Mindset and Impact. No more positive self-talk. Your chatter, that voice, that fear center doesn't want to hear it. Okay. It wants to know that you have a plan for what's going to happen.
yeah,
You don't have to go negative, but you don't have to go positive either.
yeah,
And so you highlight reel, you figure out what components of that performance or what aspects of that performance you can take into the next one. Okay, I got to bring water, maintain eye contact, maintain energy levels, start strong like this. So now you have your game plan. So step one, highlight reel. Step two, game plan. Step three is visualize that plan working. Okay, now I know where I'm going to be. Let me see what it would probably look like in this presentation. Once you do that, you know what that does to confidence. And this is another thing I'm so proud of in our model. We don't teach people to relax before a performance. You are going into battle, pump up. All right.
yeah,
So we teach a lot of adrenaline breathing, just a no pause breath of
yep,
5 of those. And then you shake out that adrenaline through your body. You're ready to go. Sometimes I call it the boxer bounce, where you're on your
yeah,
toes, you're bouncing, getting that energy out. But people need to remember it's time to pump up. You're going to perform. You relax after the performance. Your body doesn't want you calming down. You're actually going to be that toxic positivity if you try to calm down, and your brain's going
yeah,
to fight back. So highlight reel, game plan, visualize it. Pump up when it's time to perform. And then during your performance, you want to make sure you're maintaining your attention control, like where your focus is, because that dictates your reality,
yep,
and your energy management. Can you stay in the zone? Not too hot, not too cold, that just right. After, though, this is the most crucial thing, and athletes are so just not naturally good at this. I didn't want to say bad at it, but they're just not naturally good at this. You got to have post-game reflection and tell yourself that worked and
yep,
celebrate. You don't have to party, but it has to be a mental celebration of I did that, it wasn't lucky, and I can do it again.
yep,
And then that physical elation. I literally walk out of my office. You can watch our cameras. Like, I'm pumped after a day. I always do this. It feels good. Like, you did it, man.
yep,
And so the next day, I keep doing that. Celebration is a crucial component of habit development.
Yeah.
So you do it next time. And now you've closed the self-fulfilling prophecy cycle. And ideally, this will start to become habitual routines
Yeah.
rather than forced every single time. And you do this, everyone, I am going to be ecstatic to see, because I bet you start hitting all your goals and you start dictating your performances and predicting them.
And I know that's something I talk about. It's you sometimes you find like a theory. We kind of just talked about it. You find a theory, you find some information, you find some strategy, and all of a sudden, like it's coming up every single time you talk to somebody. It's like, am I doing it because of recency bias, or am I doing it because like I feel like this is what they need? And I feel like that's where I'm at with post game reflections. Like getting in a consistent habit of, regardless if it was a good, if you felt like it was good or bad, do the same thing of like, what went well? How do I continue to do those things? What didn't go well? How do I make that improvement? Because that way, at least you're learning every single time. You're building more of an optimistic mindset. You're building confidence. Like you're building motivation to get better. Like, so yeah, what are you doing afterwards? Because if we're tying back in perfectionism, what are you going to look at is everything that went wrong, right? So you're not noticing. I go 7 for 10 from the field. I'm going to focus on those three misses. Well, what did you do to hit the seven? Like
70%
come
shooting, you kidding
on.
me? Yeah.
Um, but then I like what you said before, what you do before performance, right? So just being able to visualize, like not just your plan, but your plan being put into effect.
Yep.
And I think, yeah, that's something I tend to do also is like get away from that positive negative and like what's productive, right? Like what's productive for you to say to yourself, for you to think about that's going to get you where you need to be. So maybe you do visualize yourself making a mistake, but how are you going to bounce back from that mistake? Right? Because I've started to make that shift. Like, yeah, visualize everything going correctly. Well, what happens if something doesn't go correctly in your performance, right? So maybe
Mhm.
it's like a form of contingency planning
Yeah.
too, right? But yeah, seeing yourself successfully implementing what that plan is. So now when you get into it, speaking of attention control, since you've visualized it, you don't necessarily have to like put too much attention to it because you've created
Yep.
those neural pathways in your brain, right?
Yep.
So I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. Yeah, getting
That's
yourself.
a great point. And you actually brought up something that I always have to kind of keep an eye on in this work. I love contingency planning, but you also got to make sure you just don't overdo that
Yep.
and get into that like fear cycle of that OCD. Oh no, this is inevitable. If you
Yep.
think fears or mistakes are inevitable, now you've crossed into that false safety cycle. If you feel like they're controllable and preventable, now you're good. Now you're just planning.
Yep. Yeah, like everything in moderation, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is, I think, where a lot of my trauma work comes in, man, because I still do a lot of the trauma work in community mental health and clinical work. It's that trauma makes you think it's inevitably gonna happen again.
Yep.
And
Yep.
this is kind of what happens with OCD and the false safety cycle. That's why I love the sports psych work and my knowledge in trauma, because you see the same thing happening. The
Yep.
mistake is inevitable unless I do something. That's not true.
Yep. Yep. And then I like the part you talk about not getting people to relax.
Ooh.
I
Mhm.
the way I picture that too is, maybe again, if we're looking at, inverted U, right? Like everybody has we know how energy activation works with performance, right? And everybody has their own zone where they work better. Some people work higher on the higher energy activation side versus the lower side, So if I am relaxed, if I do perform better relaxed, okay, let's talk about how to relax. But like maybe that's not how you perform better. So yeah, like how do we get you to be amped up or to get you to the right amount of like stress you need? Because no matter what you do when you perform, like you're going to experience stress.
Yeah.
Like
You
like you
want
said,
it.
you're going into battle, right?
Yeah,
Like
you want stress.
yeah,
Stress helps you perform at your best. Like if I'm at working with an athlete and they have a championship game and they're cold as ice, I'm like, do you care? Like, do you
yeah.
realize what you're doing right now? Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
It's yeah, it's like, come on, man, like you should experience something. I work with a lot of pilots right now, and it's like I tell
Yeah,
them, like I'm not gonna eliminate your stress. You're getting into a multi-million-dollar jet that is in charge of like killing people.
yeah,
Like you should be stressed out heading into that thing. But how do we make it manageable?
yeah.
You
One of
know?
my favorite sports to work with, just because I'm passionate about it, is like mixed martial arts and
Oh
boxing.
yeah.
And a lot of the
Yeah,
MMA
right? Like you're
fighters I
going
work
into a
with,
fight with somebody.
yeah,
Like
I tell them
a
like,
real
hey,
fight.
yeah, I was like, you know why we're going to talk about fear right now? Because you could literally die in your fight right now. It's happened. Okay, so you want to tell me you're
Yeah.
not afraid? You want to try to shut that fear center off? It's not going to happen. We got to use it because
Yeah.
it's a part of your biology. So I like that you bring that up.
I think one of the first people I almost worked with was an MMA fighter. And I remember she said, like, I don't fear death. And I was like, oh, geez, like, what do I do with this? First time
Yeah,
hearing it though, but it makes sense. Like, hey, you're going into a small ring where your job is to, you know, kill
Shut,
or beat that
shut it.
person up. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Shut their button off.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so what about the parents? You said there was going to be
Yeah.
something you would do with the parents. So what would you do with the parents to help in this situation?
So what we've noticed is that parents don't ever have a manual, and I feel so bad for them because like they
Yeah.
no one ever knows what the perfect parent looks like. So what I've tried to do is give them four basics that if they're hitting these four marks based off of ARC model theory, you're basically hitting your potential as a parent. The first one is called putting your mask on first.
Hmm.
So it's affect and mood regulation. So for the listeners, affect is how you show your mood on your face. If I was going to look at you and guess what your mood was, that's affect. And then mood is like what you're actually feeling.
Yeah.
And they're very different because some people can mask that a lot. Well, if anyone's ever rode like an airplane and they're giving that safety speech in the beginning, they always tell parents if the oxygen masks deploy, put yours on first. And it makes so much sense because those things are tough. If you're panicking and you're fumbling with your kids and now you pass out, the kid passes out.
Yep.
So this is a really important component of being a parent. Put your mask on first. Check your false safety cycles because we project onto our kids. I'll get to that in a minute. So affect and mood regulation. Are you able to stop and catch yourself and know where your body and your mind is at before you respond? Attunement is the second one. This is from attachment theory,
Mm.
knowing what your athlete is going through if they can't verbalize it. Some athletes are really good ducks on the pond, stone face, but feet mile a minute or whatever it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
like underwater.
Now I'm just picturing. I'm like, oh, dude, I love that. Just the feet
Yeah,
going underwater.
yeah. And so, like, a good attuned parent knows what's happening internally if they can't even show it on their affect. Like, the kid can't show them or tell them what they need. As a parent, I'll tell you right now, man, we know the difference between a pain cry for an infant, a hunger cry, a wet diaper cry. That's attunement.
Yeah.
Your kid can't tell you what they need, but you know them and you know
Yep.
what they need. So when you tell a kid, hey, you feeling afraid right now? Oh, I don't feel alone. Like, you just named what
Yeah.
I'm going through. Like, okay, I feel like I can deal with that now.
I'm picturing the I'm fine meme too. It's like,
Yep.
kid, you doing all right? I'm fine. It's like, I don't think so. Tell
Yep,
me more.
exactly.
Like, yeah, just being into like what they're saying, how they're looking, like is their actions matching their words and vice versa,
Mhm.
you know?
The most amazing quality of being a human, well, one of the most amazing qualities of being a human being is our ability to read nonverbal cues. We can attach to people. We can feel what they're feeling. It's all nervous system biology. This isn't, like freaky psychology stuff. Our nervous system can feel when another person's is. If you've ever
Yeah.
sat next to someone who's antsy, you kind of get a little uncomfortable and
Yeah,
antsy.
you said the feel a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So like when you're in tune with that athlete, with your kid, it's an amazing feeling and they don't feel alone. They
Yeah.
feel like the pack has their back again. So affect and mood regulation, making sure you are the pilot flying that plane through turbulence when all the passengers are freaking out. How do you keep your cool and show that you've got this? And then the attunement, knowing that they're actually afraid and how you can help them bring that out of the internal state. You also, this is where people like, I do get people bucking against this a little bit, but I promise you, I'm just going with what the research shows. Praise and natural consequences versus punishment.
Hmm.
Natural consequences is a real thing. Okay. You don't need to, if a kid is having a temper tantrum, they throw their toy and break it. That's a natural consequence and it will teach them next time. Maybe I got to try to regulate my mood.
Yeah.
But if you go in there and take their toy and break it because they're having a temper tantrum, they're never going to see the connection. We don't know why in psychology, but punishment never extinguishes bad behavior.
Hmm.
It actually teaches people how to get more efficient at maintaining that behavior. But if you have natural consequences in place, just like the world does, and you have what's called environmental friction. So they kind of learn based off of how the environment bumps them and pushes them to their path. And like we've talked about with strengths all the time, if you see a kid doing something right, tell them that you want them to keep doing that. How many times have you coached basketball and seen a kid make a great play, but they didn't realize they made a great play? And so you have to tell them, keep doing that. Like
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah.
Stick to the game plan. So everyone's the worst mentality I have with this approach is why should I be praised for something I should be doing all along? If you want it to continue, you tell them. It has to take that much work to just say, hey, good job.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not that they need to know that they should be doing this all along. That is a discipline over motivation strategy, and it doesn't work. If
Yeah.
you intrinsically motivate someone to do the right thing, because kids want to do the right thing, and you tell them that they're doing it, hey, that was a really good shot, keep doing that. Now their brain knows, do this rather than don't do this.
Yeah, I think that's just how our mind works, right? It's like if I tell myself to like we go back to how you playing hesitant or playing not to fail. Like if I say don't mess up, what is that going to do versus like, hey, go do this. What is that now going to do? You
I
know?
love the skiing analogy. I'm not even a skier, but I love this analogy of like you don't watch the trees because you're going to ski into them. You watch
Yeah.
the path. You don't look at the things you're avoiding because you're going to
Yeah.
go into them. And it's I'll tell the listeners right now, let's try this technique. All right. It's a thought irony technique. I want everyone to do your best to not picture a big pink polka dotted elephant. Don't think of it. Don't think of a big pink polka dotted elephant right now.
Dude,
Because if
I'm
you're
just
doing
trying so hard to stare at your chin on this video to like not think about it. But like,
it, and it works, right?
yeah, it's hard, but like, because I noticed I was shifting back and forth because it's like
Yeah.
elephant, nope, elephant,
Mhm.
nope, stop it.
It's not stubbornness, but our brain hates being told what not to do. You
Yeah.
don't want to just try to stop a train on the tracks. You want to use its momentum and guide it. And that's what telling people what to keep doing. That's why it's so much more effective than to tell people what to stop doing.
Yeah.
It's just biology and neurobiology.
Yeah, and I think even adding the extra layer to that, like when they do something good, it needs to be more than just like, "Hey, good job." Like, tell them why it was a good job because I think
Yes.
that's what also
Yes.
now reinforces the behavior, right? Is like they said good job. I don't know what I did, but I'm gonna try to mimic it. And then if I do it wrong, it's like, oh crap! Like, what did I do? If I say, "Hey, you did this well because X, Y, and Z," it's like, okay, now I know what to do to make sure like that's good again.
Yep. Yeah, and that gets into actually the last tenet of the four. So just a reminder. So affect and mood
Yep.
regulation, putting your mask on first. Attunement, knowing what your kid's going through if they can't say it. Praise and natural consequences as behavioral change mechanisms. And then consistency. Our body is so in need of predictability for safety purposes. And
Mm.
consistency allows for that. That's why people that have routines and their daily routines cemented, they succeed. They don't have to put much thought into it. So if you can be that consistent, united front, whether it's you giving the same message as a coach, as a teacher, as any authority figure in their life, you are going to be able to be more effective at caregiving versus that parent. I've seen this and it's tragic. The coach has prepped up one of our track runners to be perfect with their game plan. They're on the blocks. They look over to their parent. Their parent gives them one little look, and the game plan changes. And they go to their parent's game plan and they lose. It's not because the parent was wrong, it's because the athlete has no clue on which plan to go with. So
Yeah.
consistency is everything, and predictability is everything as a caregiver.
Yeah, and I've definitely experienced that as a high school coach. It's like, who do I listen to, my coach or my parents?
Exactly.
It's such an unfair position to put a child in,
It is.
because like, I don't know, like I would expect them to listen to their parents because they got to go home to them. They don't got to go home to me,
Yeah.
like, so
Mhm.
yeah, it's making sure there's that like consistent message or like you as a parent being like, hey, you're in your coach's domain. Like, listen to him. And I've even had parents tell me that too is like, you know, I'll have parents who I know played basketball, but they're like, I don't even touch it. I whatever you tell him goes.
Yeah.
You know,
That's smart.
and that's huge. Because then it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I have this game plan. I look at my parent, and they say something else or give me that wink. It's like, oh yeah, I need to follow that one. And now it's like, well,
Yeah.
now what happens? Because now you execute your parents' game plan, and what's your coach thinking now? Then it just becomes a big vicious cycle of not
Yeah.
performing to my best, or not enjoying what I'm doing at the very least.
I love it. And what this whole approach is based on doing or trying to help like parents prevent with their athletes is what's called projection. So
Yeah,
I'll do this in a very simple way because it's kind of a complicated subject, but just for the sake of time. So we don't know what's going on in our players' heads. We never will. So we have to assume and we have to project our thoughts, feelings, and experiences and stuff into their head to try to get them to do what we want them to do. As a coach, we want them to win. So
yeah.
we have to be in their head, but we can only do that using our minds. And so you see this with coaches and parents projecting fears into the athletes. The worst thing a parent or a teacher or a leader or a coach can do for the kid is to create false safety behavior cycles that we
Mm,
talked about. And so if you tell an athlete who's just balling out, they have the ball, they're weaving through everyone, and like you're as a coach fearing that they're going to turn it over, even though it hasn't happened yet. And so you tell them, you got to pass the ball. They're going to look at you like, why?
yeah,
It's working. What are you afraid of? Oh
yeah,
no. Should I be afraid of something? And now you've got them of worrying about something that didn't happen
yeah.
because you projected it. And it causes their play to do that safety cycle stuff, avoidance, all that.
Yeah, because maybe they were locked in. They were in that flow state, and then they hear that one extra piece of stimulus coming from you as a coach, and they're like, "Oh, wait, I should be paying attention to that," and now they're out of
Nailed
it.
it.
Yeah,
This is where I bring in that Gilbert Arenas clip again, is because he, after he missed those free throws for the Cavs and LeBron, was so excited, went to the gym, like did the interview, like I can't wait to go back into the lab and keep working, which is the ideal mindset.
yeah,
Until a reporter goes, "Hey, did you start thinking about those free throws? Did they mess with you?" And he's like, "Wait, what do you mean? Why would they mess with me? Oh
yeah,
no. Like now I gotta do something about this." And he goes and he actually works with Kobe's Navy SEAL to
yeah.
get out of his
I
head. So he
remember
gets the
that
right
dude. I
approach.
remember that story about him working with a Navy SEAL, man.
Yeah, because someone projected the fear into him.
Yeah,
He was doing exactly what he should do as an athlete, back into the lab, like
yeah,
perfect your craft, and someone put a fear in his head that he didn't have. And if a coach does this or if a parent does this, you have to be really careful, because unless it's a guaranteed thing to happen, like yeah, you see your kid running to an outlet with a fork, you can project that fear onto them and make them not do it.
yeah,
But if it's the failure, you are causing a perfectionistic cycle. You're projecting perfectionism into your kids. And because kids are developing their image, they're susceptible to projective identification, taking on all of those fears and other people's goals and mindsets. And so
yep,
we got to be really careful with how we do that as parents and coaches and teachers.
yep. And you know this, that a child's like explanatory star, the behaviors they exhibit, they manifest and create those neural pathways as early as what, like 5?
As soon as language comes on board,
Yeah,
this is
like
why I always tell parents too, like, look, this is something that can prove kind of what I'm saying to you. They form their inner voice based off of your voice. How does a kid tell you they're proud of themselves? Mom and dad said I did great. Mrs. So and so said I did great. Mr. So and so said I did great. Coach said I did great. Like they're using all of those voices to form their own self-talk voice. And
yeah,
so what voice are you putting in your kids' heads is something to really be mindful of.
yeah, yeah. No, true that, man. Look, I super appreciate you coming on and just the conversation we had. That it went a lot. I didn't know what to expect because obviously the first one sort of thing, but I don't think I could have pictured this going a better way. Like I love the conversation we had in terms of like just not how I think it all ties into how your mindset impacts your ability to perform, but with the clip, like what can we do as consultants? What can we do as parents to help guide athletes, children, whoever to where they can get the most out of their skill set, the most out of life, right? Because if we tie all this conversation in together, yeah, how do I get you to perform better? But with all these things we're talking about, like praising uh non-consequences, like praising failure, things like that. Like if we take this approach, what does that now do for that athlete in their everyday life as opposed to their performance? So very important topic. So yeah, I definitely appreciate you coming on. Where can the people find you?
Yeah. So you can always go on our social media, Impact Sports Lab. You can look up our website, impactsportslab.com. Anyone can feel free to email me at any time, tony@impactsportslab.com. I could talk about this stuff forever. So please, if anyone's interested, reach out and ask any questions you might have. I'm happy to talk about it.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, man. Tony, you're a real one. So yeah, I appreciate you hopping on. Thank you so much. That's going to do it for today's episode. Everybody watching, listening, make sure to like, follow, rate, review. I'm sure there's another one I'm forgetting, but whether you got Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart Radio, YouTube, whatever you got, yeah, go ahead and make sure you subscribe to all those. Thank you all for listening. Remember, today is a great day to make an impact, not just on your own life, but on somebody else's life. So that's going to do it. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate you, man.